Sarah Hanson-Young, welcome to the program.
Good morning, thanks for having me, Dave.
I'll come to Ken Henry's view on why this legislation is better than the current set of laws that we have. But just first on this morning's offer from Murray Watt on native forest logging. What do you make of that?
Well, look, I think it's good to see the government putting some issues on the table that we've raised, that we've been talking to them about. We obviously have to go through the details of these things. We haven't seen any detailed amendments from the government or anything that kind of spells out exactly how this would work. But I've been working pretty hard to convince the government that we need to have more protections in this bill because as it is, it actually is a step backwards. And rather than protecting our native forests, protecting our climate, it's all about fast-tracking projects. The whole point of the Environment Protection Act is to protect nature. And if we don't have a step forward for protecting nature, then it's failing to do its job. It just doesn't do what it says on the tin.
Okay. Now,
so I reckon, yeah, easy probably, talk on this as well, but the whole my understanding is, and anyone can correct me here, but my understanding is that the point of this reform is to streamline some of the projects that need to go ahead, and specifically around renewables as well. And I think what she's sort of saying there is like, okay, yeah, you can. Will new coal and gas projects also come under those streamlined processes? Like, you guys tell me if that's how you interpret that too. I understand that they want to basically try and remove a lot of the red tape around the renewable projects, because in the AMO ISP, one of the biggest concerns around renewables is that the delays in the project. So this is a way that they can fast track them, but I guess that it is true, like maybe coal and gas could get slipped into there too.
I will come back to whether this bill improves on the current set of laws that we have when it comes to nature, but you met yesterday with Murray Watt, as I understand it, and presumably he went through this native forest logging concession, a 3-year transition for regional forestry agreements to comply with the new national environmental standards. Is that something you welcome?
Look, we will, we'll talk about this when we see the details and when we, when my party room's able to have a proper discussion.
But
three more years of the destruction of our native forests, when we've got 2,000 plus species already endangered in this country, where we've got billions of dollars of taxpayer money already spent subsidising an industry that's about destroying our native forests. I mean, it's 2025 and it's time we ended native forest logging, protected these beautiful ancient forests that aren't just there for the richness of biodiversity, but they're so important when it comes to combating climate change. They are carbon sinks. In fact, one of the easiest and fastest ways of helping Australia meet our emissions targets is by saving our native forests and stopping them being logged.
So you could suggest a shorter time frame for this transition then, instead of 3 years, 2 years, 1 year?
Look, I think the time frame, at first blush, I think as I said, another 3 years of destroying our forests is pretty. I don't think in any way deals with the urgency of protecting our native forests now. But of course, we also then need to make sure what does the standards mean? What does meeting those standards? How do we?
Yeah, so I reckon on that, I think they're going to come back and basically say like how important is forest logging to our net zero target as well. Like, how much does ensuring that the forests are there, and how much do they actually contribute to the overall net zero goal as well? And I think these sort of laws are going to play a big part in confirming all that too. So I think this is all on point.
actually make sure our forests are protected, that they're not just protected for the animals that live within them, but that they're protected for our climate. I mean, a lot of people would be shocked to know, David, that under existing law, it's totally okay to log a native forest where there is endangered species.
And that's the point, isn't it? That under the existing law, there's an exemption for regional forestry
that's
agreements.
right.
Surely this, even if it's 3 years to transition, is an improvement.
Well, look, I mean, this is why we will kick the tyres on this, and we'll look at it.
But would you really vote no to an improvement for native forests?
I think we will have to get to the details and make sure it actually is. You know, the devil's always in the details, so we'll have a good look at this. We'll kick the tyres on it. But let me say, you know, I have been crystal clear with the Minister that we need protections for native forests. I've said it publicly, I've said it privately, I've said it repeatedly. So the fact that they've put this on the table today is a good sign that they're starting to listen. But there's plenty of other things in this bill too that need fixing. I mean, what was tabled in the Parliament is actually a step backwards from the status quo.
So explain
it doesn't include native forest
why is
protections.
it a step backwards from the current legislation?
One of the most egregious parts of this package is that it fast tracks coal and gas projects. So
yeah, and that's exactly what I was saying before. It's gonna. I think the whole point of it is to focus on, you know, fast tracking the renewables projects, but there is that sort of, you know, can coal and gas slip into those? Is coal and gas going to be mentioned as, you know, if you have, you know, this many emissions, then, you know, you can't follow this process or you go down a different line. If that's not in there, it's going to look very sus for people that are already highly, the coal and gas industry already has a very, very bad rap in Australia, and any sort of government that kind of sees to be favouring coal and gas, the coal and gas industry, they kind of get pulled into that, and all the lobbyists and I think I heard some people saying that about the COP31 was that, Labor didn't actually want COP31 to be held in Adelaide because, well, it's not Labor, it was actually the coal and gas lobbyists didn't want it actually held in Adelaide because then it brings too much attention to how much Australia is scamming Australians with coal and gas and high energy prices and stuff like that. So I can sort of see where that, I can see the bouncing ball on that. But I feel like this is also missing the fact that I think it's by design meant to be for speeding up, the renewable projects.
Under the current law, coal and gas projects are treated the same as everything else. There's a process that you go through. Under this proposal from Labor, coal and gas projects could be approved within 30 days, fast-tracked, sped up, accelerated,
but
at the exact time when we actually have to be reducing emissions, doing more for climate action.
But they would also have to comply, those projects, coal and gas and everything else, with the new national environmental standards, which they currently don't. Coal and gas projects have to apply by their applications are assessed under the existing law, just like anything else. Forestry is carved out, salmon farming in Tasmania is carved out, land clearing in places like Queensland is carved out. But again, these new laws would introduce these national environment standards for all of these things. To come to this point that it's worse than what we've currently got. I mean, Ken Henry has a very different view on this. Even before the latest concessions the government's offered you, he's been urging the Parliament to get behind this. New national environment standards, an EPA, which we don't currently have, as a cop on the beat, as it's called, tougher penalties for environmental breaches. Surely this is better than the current laws we have.
Well, the problem is, David, is that the existing law is riddled with loopholes and get-out clauses. What the government's put on the table doesn't close any of those, puts more in, and allows coal and gas to be fast-tracked. So the government's talking about wanting to speed up approvals for renewables and housing. But what they're not saying is that this also speeds up approvals for coal and gas, for fossil fuels. So not only have they refused to work with the Greens on putting in place a climate trigger or putting in place considerations of the pollution that these coal and gas mines make, both here in Australia and overseas, but they're actually allowing them to put the foot on the accelerator, and that needs to be stopped. That would be a terrible step backwards.
But don't decisions need to be made more speedily? I mean, take a look at this. This is the renewables rollout at the moment, and the long delay.
I feel like is a bit separate, but like this is kind of why we need the Liberal Party to be, or like the coalition, sorry, this is why we need the coalition to be a bit more united, because this kind of pushback is good. Like I kind of think like let's just give Labor the benefit of the doubt in this, and let's just say that they are, going down this path, being like, okay, we're going to fast track this because we need renewables to roll out quicker, so that way we can get cheaper energy prices, we can reduce our emissions, and we can reach our targets, and et cetera, right? And then they don't mention coal and gas. And then this is good pushback, saying like, okay, well, how come you haven't mentioned coal and gas? And then that could actually like then go back and forth, and then they end up amending, the reform and et cetera. But like when you don't have like a solid coalition, like a coalition should be coming back, fighting for these things too. But you could probably part of the coal and gas little thing going on here. But yeah, like this is the kind of pushback that we're missing from the coalition at the moment, or effective pushback from the coalition, because there's just too much infighting and stuff like that. All these points she's making is it's 100, like they're 100% valid. It's kind of like, well, why isn't coal, like if you're going to be reducing emission targets, like then why would you allow coal and gas projects to be fast tracked and stuff like that? Like I think David Speers has kind of touched on it anyway. Like we've got all these standards anyway, so all those standards are going to apply to those same coal and gas projects. So ultimately we should be safeguarded in that respect. I don't like with the whole phase out of coal, not gas specifically, because it's still there for firming, but for coal projects, we can't be, in the next 10 years or whatever, we actually just can't have that many coal plants anyway. So I don't see that many actually come to the table, post the next few years. Like there's probably already contracts that have been, signed off on and things like that are going ahead. But, if you fast forward to the 2030 target, a lot of those places have sort of got to be shut down, or if not, those carbon emissions have got to be offset by some mechanism.
In this graph from RenewMat. At the moment, battery projects taking, I think it's 14 months. This is the mean time it takes to approve a battery project. Something like 16 months for solar, 34 months for a wind project, an onshore wind project. Some of them, as Ken Henry has pointed out, can take up to 9 years to approve. We're not going to achieve net zero by 2050 under the current laws, are we?
Well, and we're not going to achieve net zero if we continue destroying our native forests either. So and rampant land clearing.
But again,
and we're not going
to.
But let me be clear, David. We're not going to get to net zero if we keep opening new coal and gas mines. And under these rules that have been tabled by the government, they want to allow them to be sped up. There's a reason that companies like Chevron, BHP, Santos are all backing what the government tabled. They want this because they know, alongside renewables, they think they're going to be able to be in the fast lane. My view is that would be a terrible step backwards.
Well, a fast lane for either a quicker yes or a quicker no is the point here.
Except that this is a government that has approved 32 coal and gas projects since they came to government, right? 5 since the election, since May.
Yeah, so this is like it's you kind of, well, I'm going to say this. What Dave Speers said then is very, very clever. Like, it is a fast track, yes, but they could also fast track a no. But she's also got a point here saying that, they're still approving and they've approved more. But if they really, I don't see the Labor Party approving more in the future to the degree that either government have approved in the last decade or whatever. Especially if they want to meet that target. Like, they're not going to set this massive target and then start, going backwards on that. Like, to me, like, maybe I'm just getting scared myself, or I don't know, but I just don't see how that would make sense. I don't know. But I get what she's saying, but I just don't see it being used as a way that, the Labor government can start approving all these new coal plants. I just don't think that's the intent of what's going on here. And they still have control over what gets approved and what doesn't. So, just because it can be done doesn't mean that it's going to be done. So I'm a little skeptical on, that line of logic. Like, it's there, but I don't think that's how it's actually going to be used.
I've got no hope that they're going to be getting fast no's. I think they'll be getting fast yeses unless we keep them in the slow lane.
Okay, but you would get, as Ken Henry points out, a new EPA, new environmental standards. Government's now offering you a transition on native forest logging. Are you really willing to make the perfect the enemy of the good here?
Look, no. What we want to make sure is that there is a package that genuinely protects nature and puts that protection front and centre. What the government has tabled so far doesn't do that. So they do need to work with us to try and fix that and improve it. And I'm up for that. I met with the minister on the weekend. We're working hard on this. But also Labor have to pick a side here. I listened to the commentary before this interview, and on one hand they're saying, they're willing to get a deal done with the coalition that fast tracks coal and gas, that makes life easier for coal and gas, that doesn't stop rampant land clearing, that doesn't stop the destruction of our native forests. Right? They're happy to do that. But then on the other hand, they're saying, we'll work with the Greens to fix all these things. What does Labor actually want? What is the objective? What is the objectives of this law? It should be about protecting our environment and protecting our climate.
So where is it at now for you, just before we leave this issue? What's the red line that you still are holding? What does the government need to do to get your vote?
Well, we definitely want to make sure that we are protecting native forests and ensuring that is done.
But you've welcomed the progress on that?
Well, I'm absolutely welcoming the progress, but we have to kick the tyres to see if that really does make the difference it needs to. We also want to make sure that we're not seeing coal and gas fossil fuel projects accelerated. We wanted to see these projects assessed for the climate damage that they do, the damage that their carbon pollution has on the environment, and the government is being stubborn about that. I mean, I think it's crazy. 2025, you're talking about a new set of environment laws, and it doesn't even consider the climate pollution that a coal or gas mine takes in, that makes.
Just to be clear for people on that, it wouldn't be considered as part of the approval process, but climate emissions and mitigation plans would have to be submitted as part of a reporting requirement. That's a new transparency measure that's not there at the moment.
So we've pushed the government to at least.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that there's still, I think what she's saying is 100% warranted, but I think as David Speers is kind of pointing out, like those things aren't in the current laws at the moment, but the whole point of these reforms and that is, to introduce the standards and introduce these new systems such that they have to provide this kind of detail. And then, they're going to be fast-tracked. And it could be a yes and it could be a no. And I think a lot of her argument is basically saying, well, the fact that they haven't mentioned coal and gas, it means, there is a possibility that these could fall through the cracks, or maybe that's their hidden agenda based on their past behaviour, which is completely fine. And I think, what they're asking is just for a little more in the reform, so that way, they can actually have confidence that, what they're thinking is actually going to happen isn't going to happen. But I think Labor's a bit more focused on, getting it all done, getting it all out there.
To require some disclosure of the amount of pollution that coal and gas mines will make. Mind you, they won't admit what the big pollution is. What's called Scope 3. When it's burnt offshore. That's where the big damage is done. But then I asked the question.
It is funny that she mentioned that about the Scope 3 stuff. So Because that's going to come into the safeguard mechanism at some point. I can't remember when it actually gets implemented, but like the whole argument around Australia only emits like 1% or whatever they say is, it completely negates, or it completely disregards what our emissions are out of Australia. So we ship fossil fuels to China or Japan or Korea or whatever, and then they burn it, and then does that count towards us? Does it count towards them, et cetera, et cetera? When you actually factor in those emissions and then you factor in our population, you actually find that Australia emits like a really big chunk of the emissions budget of CO2 until 2050, right, from 2025. No, not to 2050. It's our budget from 2025, how much we can emit, which is like 200 gigatons of CO2 or something. And then once we get to that, we could possibly be reaching that no return zone in terms of global warming. So like Australia does contribute a much larger percent of that than that 1%. And I think this is sort of what she's touching into here as well, which is where the scope 3 isn't even considered when I believe that it is going to be implemented at some point as well. We've got additionally, by us investing into renewables allows greater production of renewables at scale, reducing entry costs for everyone. Yeah, 100%. Like, the more that we're able to roll out renewables and the more confidence we give investors and stuff like that, it's only going to gain momentum, and that's what Labor wants to be able to do. It wants to be able to gain momentum while we have it, and we're leaders in this industry too. If we can pull it off, it's seen as a positive. But I still think everything they're saying here is legit. I just don't think it's going to happen the way that she's sort of pointing out.
If you're going to disclose and be upfront about the amount of pollution, even just here in Australia, that these mines create, that you stop the minister being able to consider that in whether he decides to approve or knock back a mine. It does seem a bit crazy. Okay, it's like going to the bank and saying, the bank says, oh, we want all your statements, we want to know how much you earn, what you spend before you apply for a loan, and then they're not allowed to look at it. Okay. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
But once again, it's something that's not there at the moment at all. There's no requirement at all at the moment. This would be an improvement from your perspective.
Well, it would be a disclosure of the pollution. Okay. But the question is, what's that for, if not to give some direction to the minister or to the EPA that this is damaging pollution and it's going to be damaging for the environment.
Let's turn to Australia's decision to withdraw its bid for the COP Climate Summit next year. Turkey will host instead. You've called this outcome a failure of diplomacy and a failure of domestic leadership from the Albanese government. What could it have done to convince Turkey to pull out?
Look, I think it's really disappointing to see Australia not be able to secure this bid. And as as a South Australian, I was very keen to see Adelaide host this COP. But I don't think the diplomatic effort was put in. I think the government at a federal level was pretty half-hearted about this. I mean, it seems to be an open secret amongst those close to this that there were people within DFAT and senior members of the government who didn't want this because of the pressure that it would bear on Australia in relation to our fossil fuel exports.
Okay, but coming back to the question, the government did manage to win over everyone except for Turkey. What could it have done? What should it have done to force out Turkey?
Well, look, I think there could have been, of course, an ability to convince, who knows what Australia put on the table. I'm told Australia wasn't prepared to offer Turkey much at all.
So you mean they should have offered money?
Well, I don't, look, these things are about negotiation. And if you've got most of the world saying Australia should have hosted the COP, and yet Australia pulls out, abandons not just...
to be clear, are you saying we should have bought off Turkey?
No, I'm saying that there are diplomatic ways that you could negotiate and try and see what kind of arrangement you could get to with Turkey. Right. In previous years, governments have had to do all sorts of things. But did Australia try everything? I don't believe they did, David. And I don't believe they did because they were under pressure from the fossil fuel industry for Australia not to host it.
What about...
Yeah, this is what I was saying before about... I think they're... all the... I forgot who I was watching. I was watching someone, and they were going on about saying that the gas and coal lobbyists have, got Labor in a good tight squeeze, and they sort of forced them, or basically played their hand in terms of, we don't want the attention on Australia because of the way that we handle our coal and gas exports. So we can't hold this big climate change movement kind of COP31 when we're literally one of the largest exporters of coal and gas, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a good talking point. How much truth it has to it, I'm yet to see. So we'll see how what sort of comes from that. But again, like, it's just it baffles me how, when we're going for COP31, you see so much stuff going on, like people kicking and screaming on social media, saying that we shouldn't be hosting it. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. We're not even a big contributor. We're dumping net zero anyway. All these sort of things, and then it's like, okay, we're not hosting the COP31, and it's like, oh, well, now we're weak, and it's now everyone hates the idea. It's like you can't win on some of these things, and it's just really funny to see how the pendulum swings back and forth. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. I don't think from the Pacific region, Australia being the main voice for the Pacific region for net zero, I don't think that the fact that Chris Bowen is still going to be there having a voice, that's a really, really good thing, and I think he's going to do well. Only thing I think they're going to touch on here as well is he going to be able to do both jobs? And I think that's going to be a touching point.
Chris Bowen, he gets this job of President for Negotiations. Is that significant in your view, and can he handle both that and his current role?
Yeah, I've seen some of the commentary about whether Chris Bowen can do both jobs. I think, well, women do it every day. We work at home and we work at work, so I'm not too worried about that. But I think this at least has Australia involved at some level, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Final one, social media age limit that's coming in.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think being the energy minister and also the spokesperson for Australia, COP31 is the equivalent of working a full-time job? And it's just, I don't want any female followers to give me backlash here, but I don't know if that's the same thing. I can't quote on that, but what do you guys think? You guys can get in trouble, not me.
A few weeks. The aim here, of course, is to stop powerful tech giants exploiting kids with addictive social media that can have real harm to their well-being. You've opposed this from the outset, though. Have any of the pleas from parents or children to support this influenced you at all?
Look, I really understand the desperation of parents on this, and as someone who's had teenagers and understand that power that social media can have over not just young people but all of us. I mean, I bet you're a bit of a doom scroller when you let yourself kind of get lost in it, David.
I love social media. It's good for my health.
But the problem here is this isn't forcing the social media companies to actually be safe, to actually clean up their act. It bans young people from being able to be on it, only up to the age of 16, of course, and then it's a free-for-all. So it doesn't clean up any of those damaging elements, the dangerous algorithms, the insidious targeting of advertising that uses people's own data to then force advertising down their throats. There are things that can be done to force legally companies like the big social media companies to be legally required to be safe for all users. Because I'm worried that what happens here is that some young people will be thrown off the system, and therefore parents will work with them. I'm worried about the kids who fall through the cracks, either are still on there when they shouldn't be, based on the age, or find themselves in even darker places on the internet. And I think that is a real risk. Putting in place a kind of false sense of protection doesn't make our children safer, and it doesn't make these platforms.
I think this stuff. I don't think that's the strongest argument, to be honest. Now these kids haven't got social media to go to, so now they're going to end up darker places on the web. I don't think that is the point of the whole digital ID system sort of thing. It is, I don't know if I've just been consumed by it, but it is also to protect, children, kids, what do you want to call them, things. No, but It is to protect them. It's because you can go onto these social media websites and then you can be, cyber attacked, you can be cyber bullied. People can say I grew up in the gaming world, so I remember when I was 10 playing being on online forums. Wasn't really online game too much then, but you'd go into these chat rooms and stuff, and people would be saying the most effed up things, and so you kind of develop a bit of a thick skin for it. But I think things are a little bit more different now, just by the level of access, and I think the things that people are saying nowadays are probably a little bit more hectic. But I believe that is the thing that they're trying to protect kids from the most. And I think you can be an online sexual predator, and you can find out where kids go to school, and you can find out where they live, and you can be stalked. I think all of that stuff is just so much more accessible and so much more dangerous now. And creeps and stuff can actually hide behind computers and have VPNs and have all of this sort of protection behind them, so they can carry out these sort of attacks. And the kids 16 under, I guess 16 is just the number that they're using, but those are the most vulnerable. So they're trying to protect those kids. It's not about trying to lock them out and so they can't talk to their friends and stuff. I think that just with the nature of the world today around social media, I'm kind of for. I see more benefits from the digital ID sort of thing. I know it's gonna be hard to implement. There's a lot of money to be spent, but I just think that there's a lot more benefits to sort of trying to get kids off social media through a ban than there is trying to go down this route of being what are they going to do now, and let's put all these different sort of measures in there to keep them monitored on platforms and stuff. I just think there's an easy way to do it, and that's just to do the ban. And then once they get to 16 and up or whatever it is, then the responsibility is more so on them. I just don't really agree with this 100%. Yeah.
Safer for everybody. I think one of the things that Australia should do is ban digital advertising for anyone under 18. You shouldn't be able to scrape, these companies shouldn't be able to scrape young.
Yeah, advertising, it does play into it, but if you do the ban, you get rid of all of it altogether. That's, if you can't do any advertising to 16 and unders, then why wouldn't you be for the ban and be able to protect them from, not just advertising, but obviously all the cyberbullying and all that sort of stuff. And, you're kind of setting them up to be this, you're kind of setting kids up from a very young age to put a lot of focus on their social profile when they shouldn't be. They should be learning basic, adult skills, how to take care of yourself, how do you, begin to learn about money, how do you learn about trade. Sorry, when I say trade, I mean stock trading. I mean you trade time and you get money, or you can trade services, or you can blah blah blah. Just negotiate. I guess you start learning that at a young age. You should be focusing on personal skills. You should be learning how to go up and communicate. I think one of the best things I did as a young kid was go up and try and talk to girls. The first time when I was straight to a girl, I was absolutely so nervous. And now I can go up and talk to a female, and it's pretty cool. I don't know what I'm engaged, but you got to learn these skills. You got to learn how to make new friends. You got to learn how to go into a room with knowing no one, and then walk out at least knowing everyone's name. And if your focus is on these social media platforms, you're probably just going to end up relying on that. And I just think up until the age of 16, you should just be really, really focused on connecting with people and making that a priority. And that's why I think the ban is just, to me, that's more of a common sense thing than just trying to focus on how can we stop companies advertising to a certain cohort. That's
people's data and then target them with advertising. If that was in place, these social media companies wouldn't care about having to have young people.
And look,
it hits them at their business model.
That's an interesting suggestion, but once again, are you at risk of making the perfect the enemy of the good by opposing what many would argue will help a lot of kids?
Look, the law's in place, right? It starts on December 10. It's happening. My concern is what happens on December 10 when young people fall through the cracks, work their way around it. I mean, I don't know about your kids,
okay.
but I know, you know, my daughter and her friends would have easily been able to get around this. They're smart kids.
That's certainly true. That's certainly true. But let me ask you this finally: are you encouraging kids come December 10 to get off social media or stay on social media?
Look, I think we need to make sure they're in places that are safe, and if they are not safe, then encourage young people to find other ways to connect.
So should they get off social media or not?
Well, if you're under 16, that's the law, that you shouldn't be on these platforms.
Yeah, but that's not what he's asking. He's asking if you as a person believe, or as the party leader or whatever, do you believe that if you are 16 or under, should you be, if you are under 16, should you be on these platforms? And she's just saying, oh, it's against the law. That's what Labor's putting. Like, if it was under your control, whether you could remove it, and let's just say hypothetically everything goes back to, you know, before it was a thing, would you be okay? Or would you not? Like, it's
platforms. My concern is making sure that kids can work with parents to ensure that where they are online, because this isn't kicking kids off the internet, let's be honest, right? You can be in a logged out mode through an internet browser, and it's a free-for-all. So that's going to be the issue here.
That's what it used to be like in the old gaming days with these 4chan forums and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's, yeah, she's right. Like, you can just go on Reddit or something. Like, I don't know if Reddit's on the list, but, you know, there's some brutal stuff on there. But, you know, social media, I think those sort of forums and that attract a certain type of person. Yeah, you're not going to escape it, but, you know, social media is very, very accessible to, like, it's like becoming like a standard, which, yeah, it's not for under 16s. I don't think that should be a thing.
How do parents work with their children to make sure when they're online, whether it's through a social media app or on the internet, that they're actually safe? And I'm worried that we've given parents a false sense of security, and the government's going to have to do more. A digital duty of care.
I don't think so. I think parents will still be concerned even after the ban's in place, because you're right, like, they're just going to find ways around it, and there's more to be concerned about on the internet, or like on social there's more to be concerned with a kid having a phone than just social media. There's a lot more. I don't think parents are just going to start going, oh, they did this ban and, you know, my kid's still getting harassed, blah, blah, blah. Like, of course they're still going to get, like, yeah, they're still going to get other things. It's never going to stop, like, a perpetrator or a bully or, you know, those people, if they can't do one thing, they'll find another way to do it, 100%.
Requiring these companies to legally have to provide safe spaces and stopping them at their business model. Why should they be able to advertise and target our children? And these companies get off on this stuff, and we need to hold them to account.
Sarah Hanson-Young, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.